Spring, and this is F101. I will be talking today about Formula One racing and giving you some context for the sport and some terms and definitions that might help introduce you to the world of Formula One. Now, if you are interested in learning more, this should just be a starting point, since I'll just be telling you about things that have come to my mind, and hopefully it will be interesting. I will also be flipping through the latest issue of F1 Racing, and this is an import in the United States, as F1 isn't nearly as popular here as it is in Europe and South America. However, even though this is a great issue and it has Daniel Ricciardo featured, who is one of my absolute favorite drivers on the grid right now, I thought it would be more informative and interesting while I flip through it to teach you some general things about F1, so in case you don't follow the sport already, you'll have a chance to learn something. So I'll be flipping through this current issue, but I will be speaking mainly about general rules of the sport and how it works, and a little bit of history and facts and things like that. So I hope you'll like it. And if you are really into Formula One, please join the conversation in the comments. And lights out, and away we go. So, F1, or Formula One, is the top tier of single-seater racing, as you can see. And it had its inaugural season in 1950. The formula in Formula One refers to a set of regulations that the constructors must comply with each season. And those rules can change from season to season. Grand Prix are the races that make up each season, and they take place all around the world, and the lineup is slightly varied every year. Typically, however, probably about half of those races will take place in and around Europe. And the European Grand Prix also tend to have the best attendance in terms of spectators. They also tend to be the most famous and iconic races on the calendar. So, next year though, they're going to add a new Grand Prix, or a Grand Prix that hasn't happened in a really, really long time, and that will be in Mexico, and that should be exciting, and they're hoping it will energize the Central American fans. Que bueno. You can see the car right here. This is the Williams. Some may argue that the practices for F1 and the qualifying races are among the most exciting, and you'll probably hear qualifying referred to as quali, sort of the cute colloquial way to refer to it. Quali. And I think that qualifying races are just as exciting as the main races, and of course at the speed and with the amount of money that goes into the sport, and the stakes are always monumental. So even practices are not boring. And you can see all the fans here. And typically fans will come out for qualifying sessions and even for open practices. And sometimes during the early practices, development drivers or sometimes stunt drivers or celebrity type drivers will get a chance to test out the track. It can be kind of fun. This is about Ferrari. And so of course Formula One cars are among the fastest on the planet. You can see one of the Red Bulls here. Sometimes I just call them the Bulls. And the reason they're so fast, especially nowadays, has a lot to do with downforce, aerodynamic downforce, and less to do with the engine or power, even though they are very, very powerful. But the downforce on these cars allows them to corner and maneuver at breakneck speeds, and it's pretty unbelievable. The cars typically run above 200 miles an hour, and so it's never boring. The cars are much quieter this year, though, than they have been in the past. And so that's something some people like, and some people don't like. So that's because the engines are limited. Again, that's part of the formula. Here you see some variations of different kinds of cars. Of course, the F1 cars aren't any kind of stock car. They're very, very distinct. Anyway, so at stake each year Here you can see Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa with one of their trophies. This is a great day for Williams. Anyway, so at stake each season is the Drivers' Cup or Championship, which is obviously for the driver who scores the most points in the season. But there's also a Constructors' Cup for the constructor who wins it. And so each team, like you can see back here, this is a Mercedes, and they are dominating this season. So one of the Mercedes drivers will win the Drivers' Championship this year. But Mercedes will also win the Constructors' Championship. But this adds in large part to the very tense team dynamics. Essentially, drivers are on the same team, but still at rivalry for that Drivers' Championship. And this creates, we can see Toro Rosso car here. So this creates endless gossip and controversy, and in my mind, plenty of exciting team radio. So you can watch for the cars, but you can also watch for the very human drama of Formula One. So team radio is the communication between the pit lane and the drivers, and strategies regarding tire types, number of pit stops, overtaking orders, and weather forecasts, and so much more can be discussed between the driver in his car and the entire crew back in the pit. Team orders are generally loathed by fans and often involve a team principal asking one driver to make way for another team driver. And as you imagine, the drivers don't like this very much either. And here you see Daniel Ricciardo and some of his team with their headphones on. So for a more colorful understanding of team dynamics, there are a couple movies out that you might enjoy. One is a drama. It's based on a true story, but is somewhat fictionalized. And that was the movie Rush. And Rush, the film, and also a documentary, which was also fairly recent, called Senna. Senna is perhaps even a bit more fascinating. These films depict rivalries between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, as well as between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. And Alain Prost is still around today. Ayrton Senna died very tragically and is very, very heroically remembered. And his nephew Bruno Senna is still very much a part of the F1 community. So, also, Niki Lauda is currently a major player on the Mercedes team and has been acutely vocal in speaking out against both team orders as well as reckless team rivalries. He knows all about them. Looking at this man, Daniel Ricciardo, who is one of the most popular people out on the grid right now, both for his skills and for his personality. He drives for Red Bull now, but speaking of dramatic team rivalries, Red Bull recently had one between Sebastian Vettel and fellow Australian, as Daniel Ricciardo is, Mark Webber. And Mark Webber ultimately left the entire sport of Formula One. He still drives, I believe, in endurance races like Le Mans. But, yeah, his disagreements, we'll say, with Sebastian Vettel got very, very heated. And now Daniel drives on the same team with Vettel, and they seem to be getting along better, but a lot has changed for Vettel this season. So, and oftentimes you'll hear him called Seb instead of Sebastian. Here's Daniel again. You'll notice that many of the drivers are quite young and somewhat model-esque. I think that has to do partially with the body type. You have to be quite slim and lithe in order to drive these cars, because weight and aerodynamics matter. But Daniel just seems like an all-around wonderful person. So, where were we? So, like I was explaining, a lot of the F1 drama takes place off the grid or the track. That is evidenced by this season's grudge match between Mercedes drivers Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, both competing for that championship. Here you can sort of see the wheel, the console of the wheel. This is actual size, so it's kind of exciting. You can sort of imagine, but you can see just how very, very complex it is. Anyhow, both drivers, Nico and Lewis, they represent Team Mercedes. And as I said, Mercedes will be this year's champion constructor. And all the teams with Mercedes engines are doing very well. This is Roman Grosjean. Anyhow, there are teams like Mercedes that use their own engines, use and manufacture. Ferrari is another example. So there are teams who manufacture their own engines, like Mercedes, and Ferrari is another example. While some teams share engines, others use affiliate engines, like Renault. You'll see here, Lotus, Team Lotus, is currently using, if you can see that on this hood, on Grosjean, you'll see it says Renault. So, yes, you can see here on this old car it says Renault. So, there is a difference, and then some teams, multiple teams use Renault right now, and multiple teams also use Mercedes. And that can change from year to year as well. And there are others. So that can be a little bit confusing because some teams can change out their engine depending on their contracts and the season, and anyhow. For example, I suppose Mercedes also powers Team Williams and McLaren, a very famous team, as well as Force India. Force India is not as established as, say, McLaren, but they've been quite fun to watch this season. So, here we have more Lotus. My hopes for the future of Formula One would see a reduction in what I consider to be stunt rules, or I don't know if that's the best way to put it, rules that I believe are there mostly to create drama. If you've ever played a video game like Super Mario Kart, they have items like shells and banana peels, things like that you can throw on the track to create trouble for other racers. And I feel that the FIA, which runs Formula One, sometimes will introduce somewhat silly rules to have the same effect, to make it more interesting for the fans, and it's understandable. But I guess a good example would be this year's final race will carry double point values for the win. Traditionally, drivers are awarded points depending on how they place, but with double points at the end of the season, there could still be a dramatic toss-up. So there are things like that. And again, speaking of the future, I would also love to see a woman driver competing in Formula One proper. Right now, Susie Wolff, married to Toto Wolff is a development driver for Williams, which means we may see more of her on the track in the future. I certainly wouldn't want them to include a woman just for the sake of including a woman, but there are a lot of women in karting and motorsports now who are very, very wonderful drivers and very worthy. So, and of course there are women. Claire Williams is a very good example. There are actually a lot of women who are very, very involved on the current F1 teams. So, and I wanted to maybe teach you a couple useful terms to know. And, oh, here's Toto Wolff right now. Toto, again, the husband of Susie, but he is also the business director at Mercedes. So, anyway, there's Patty Lowe and all the rest. All quite the characters. So, anyway. So, yes, some useful terms you might like to know. Just in case you do check out Formula One, or maybe if you want to sort of impress someone, it can be nice to know some of the terms, and just to stay abreast of what's going on. So, you may know most of these or not, but just a few that I think might be helpful. Pole position is pretty easy to understand. Pole position is whoever starts at the front during the race, which is earned through qualifying. There is something called DRS. DRS means drag reduction system, and this can be activated to reduce drag and encourage overtaking on the track. And the DRS must be activated at a detection zone, but only when the pursuing car is within a second of its rival car, the car head. Here's some statistics. They love their statistics. Tire strategy seems simple enough, tire strategy, but this can make or break each race as team mechanics and drivers attempt to anticipate the best tires for track conditions. They have to think about things like track temperature, moisture, and debris on the pavement, as well as so many other factors. And I quite like the way the announcers, I watch it on Sky, and the announcers are quite British, and so the word that we say, debris, they say debris. I always love it. I don't know. They say there's debris on the track. There's always debris on the track. Debris. Anyhow, it's very important to think about, though. It makes a very, very big difference, the compound of the tires and sort of the evolution that the tires go through in each race. So telemetry is an interesting term to know. And telemetry actually has a lot of definitions depending on what it's applied to. But in Formula One racing, telemetry is what allows the engineers to calculate the needs of a car out on the track, and then it can either calibrate in real time, which is pretty amazing, or it can help the pit get ready to calibrate the car during a pit stop. And it's quite fascinating. There's, like I said, two-way telemetry, so the cars and the information are always sort of in sync, at least ideally, when everything's properly functioning. Again, talking about tire strategy and about the pit lane, it's extremely important to decide when a car should be pit or brought to the pit, how many times, and you need to think about what tires are going to last the longest and provide the best performance when you're thinking about bringing those cars back in. And if you've never watched a Formula One pit stop, I suggest you look it up because it's pretty remarkable. A good pit stop would be in the 2-second range. Anything more than, say, 2.8 or 2.9 seconds could be considered rather long, and that's remarkable. So, here are some of the boys out on their bikes. Anyway, now talking again about the pit, you may hear the term box. You may hear them saying box, 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 box. And box is something you may hear people use, simply meaning to come into the pit lane, to box the car, to come into the box. And so you'll hear it sometimes, box, 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 box. Here's Nico Rosberg, who I was speaking of, and his rivalry with Lewis Hamilton. Both of them are all over the media. It's been kind of wild, so anyhow. Blistering is a term you might have heard or might hear. And blistering just means that when a tire starts to overheat, it might start to degrade or blister. And this can cause balance and traction issues. And it can also contribute to the spreading of the debris along the track. So, and an important one, and one of the more complicated ideas, is another initialism. I talked about DRS before. This time I'm saying ERS. ERS, which is the energy recovery system. Energy recovery system, or ERS. And energy recovery systems harvest heat and kinetic energies to help propel the cars Obviously this is a very old car. But on the new cars, you may hear people refer to this as curves, or Kers, curves, but now we call it ERS. And it has been pretty paramount in some of the changes in the cars recently, so you'll hear a lot about ERS, I'm sure, more into the future, and it's quite interesting. Another, I guess, maybe a fun word. Maybe I'll teach you one of my favorite terms. It's so silly. Oh, and here we have Lewis Hamilton. And there's Nico. There's Lewis. And they have this very intense rivalry going on now. Of course, Lewis always has his very, very big diamond earrings. He's kind of the cool kid of Formula One. Nico is sort of the very educated, sort of erudite. So it's very interesting. It's an interesting relationship they have. Anyway, I digress. Yes, my term that I'm going to throw in, it's not very important, but I think it's funny. And that is a sausage curb. You'll hear sausage curb. And these are the results of the Austrian Grand Prix. You can see everyone's grid placement. It was a very, very interesting grid, actually. Very interesting grid. Anyhow, the sausage curb are just rounded curbs to slow down cars that might go off the track. And then they penalize the drivers by reducing speed. So there are all kinds of mechanisms like this that sort of self-regulate. So instead of having to have the stewards or the judges of the races go in and assign penalties after the race, there are implements like sausage curbs that will automatically slow down drivers if they go off track, and so it sort of self-regulates and gives the drivers incentive not to get off course. So anyway, that's not that important. There's lots of different names for curbs and different track features like chicanes. Lots of corners. They all have fun historic names like Parabolica. It's my favorite. There's a curve named Parabolica, and I think that's it. It's sort of a double meaning word, but it also sounds cool. Parabolica. Sounds like someone should have an album called that. If I ever made an album, a music album, I'd call it Parabolica. So cool. But yeah, there's lots of features, and so each course is very different, and there are different turns and curves and chicanes, and there are features like sleeping policemen. That's one I like. Anyway, so every track is actually very different. Some are actually made out of real roads that people actually drive on, and some of them are newer, and some of them have a lot of topography and height and contour, and some of them have very, very long straights, and so there's a great variety, And some of the cars do really well in certain conditions and on certain tracks, and have challenges with other kinds of tracks. So it makes it quite fascinating. I've never been a big fan of motorsports where a car just goes around and around in a circle. So I quite like Formula One for the variety. Now the last term I meant to teach you, as we come to the end of the magazine and inevitably see a woman. Anyhow, the term I wanted to teach you last is called a hot lap. Hot lap. And the hot lap is an important concept. The hot lap is the lap used to set the best time possible for a car and its driver. And a hot lap might come after a formation lap or a warm-up or an energy harvesting lap. So anyway, I hope that this has given you a little bit of information about Formula One racing. And I am such a huge fan, but there's always more to learn, so these are just some thoughts I thought I would share with you. But if you are interested, I'd be happy to sometime talk a little bit more, maybe about the drivers specifically, or the cars. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you are a Formula One fan, I'd love to hear what you think of the drivers, who your favorites are, and maybe who your least favorites are, and anything else you might want to add. So, again, if you do live in the US, it can be hard to find Formula One, so you have to look for it on TV or find a broadcast you can access. I do recommend Sky. They have, in my opinion, the best coverage and the most interesting commentators. They have some very intelligent, articulate people, but they also have a good sense of humor, I think, which is important in a pinnacle sport where things can get very, very tense. So, anyhow, I hope that was good for you, and I thank you for listening. And like I said, I hope you might try to check out Formula One and let me know what you think about it. And I will be back to talk to you and hear from you very, very soon. Okay. And from me and from Daniel Ricciardo, who's just staring at you, we say have a great night or a great day.